And this is Keen On, the daily now.tv chat show with some of the world's leading thinkers and writers. Hello, everybody. It's Thursday, August the 17th, 2023, bright and early on the West Coast. It's always interesting to revisit previous conversations, or at least people I've had on the show, and think about how the world has changed since we talked. About a year and a half ago, I had Susan Brady on the show, Susan MacKenty Brady, who's the co-author of a book called Arrive and Thrive, 7 Impactful Practices for Women Navigating Leadership. It was a fun show. She talked about how she believed that leadership values like empathy, female values, or at least values that women leaders articulate perhaps better than men, more effectively than men, might help end the war in Ukraine. 18 months later, Susan and her co-authors have certainly arrived and thrived. The book has been a Wall Street Journal and a USA Today bestseller, but I'm not sure if the world has changed much. Certainly the war in Ukraine is still going on. There hasn't been much empathy articulated there. Susan, welcome back. Great to have you. Any evidence that anything's changed over the last 18 months? Congratulations on the success of the book. But have we become more empathetic? Have we collectively arrived and thrived in August of 2023?
Well, I would say no. Although I don't see me. Am I live and moving? I don't know where my video is, but do you have what you need?
Yeah, we're all good, Susan. You've arrived and thrived. Don't worry
great.
about the video.
Yeah, good. So listen, first of all, thank you for having me back. I think that leading with impact is going to require some of the practices in this book. That's the thing that's become clear to me even more since Janet and Lynn and I wrote the book. And you bet the challenge of our day is one of empathy and connection with self and with others. It's a leadership requirement. And it's why my next book is actually written. I'm partnering with 2 men and writing for men about this topic, hopefully in a way that is compelling to men.
Susan, we get these kind of books all the time out of business school. It makes the professors successful, wealthy, famous, puts you on the bestseller list, makes maybe the students feel good about themselves. It doesn't seem to change anything. Maybe I'm fairly skeptical here, but are you, and I mean you collectively, your class of what Trumpians would call academic coastal elites, are you just pleasuring yourselves with these kinds of this kind of happy talk?
You haven't lost your provocateur-esque nature. I'm happy to see. So first of all, just to clarify, I am not an academic. I am a pragmatist. I have been a consultant, coach, and business leader for the past 25 years, leading.
But you're associated with Simmons.
You bet. Yep.
So you're the Deloitte Ellen Gabriel Chair for Women and Leadership, the CEO of Simmons University's Institute for Inclusive Leadership. That sounds fairly academic to me.
It is, but let's just be very clear. The work of the institute that I founded and lead is, I think, guided by a pragmatic value, which is if you can't do something differently as a result of reading something we've published, of listening to one of our, podcasts, of, attending one of our courses, coming to one of our conferences, then we're failing. I don't want to think about it. I want to see change. And so we have to make it more accessible and incentivize everyone to come into the conversation. Right. So,
but that's more, again, that's more, it seems to me, Susan, just more happy talk come into the conversation. Nothing seems to ever change. And yet and I'm not just picking on your business school, all business schools, they all seem to get wealthier and wealthier, more and more pleased with themselves, and yet the world doesn't change.
Well, Simmons is not getting wealthier and wealthier. We hold a interesting place.
Okay, I don't want to turn it into I'm not accusing Simmons in any way. I'm sure it's as good or as bad as any other institution. But my point is that this kind of talk of empathy and leadership and responsibility and communal blah, blah, blah goes on and on and on. And meanwhile, we're expecting a Trump Biden rematch, for example, that nobody wants, that we're getting two old men, two completely out of touch old men. How are we going to change anything? I mean, we need to read your book. I'm not suggesting that your book is irrelevant or unfair or wrong, but I just don't know how we break through here.
Well, look, I think that there's going to be some erosion in value. And that is why people are going to start paying attention. When it starts to hurt, right? When our approaches of having relationships and having conversations and leading businesses and trying to win customers and have great profitable partnerships start to fail because the way we're doing them doesn't work for humans anymore, people will change. So it's probably going to have to get worse before it gets better, right?
Well, that sounds like the old Leninist dictum in the First World War. Better to experience catastrophe in the war and then bring down the Tsar. Same thinking about the left in the 1960s, more Vietnam because that was a good thing. Or perhaps the right now is thinking that the Trumpians bring the state down. I mean, is that where we need to go? Complete social, cultural, political collapse?
Oh, well, I hope not. I would hope not. Look, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to engage men in a conversation that has margin for error. So where my work right now is focused is, I work for a women's-centered university and run an institute that brings the work of inclusion and a pathway for women to step in fully to their potential to companies and organizations around the world. The opportunity, if I look at gender parity as a sort of a business, a cultural imperative, that, to your opening comments, affords us more feminine qualities and masculine qualities and traditional ways of working that are necessary, that are disrupting and necessary to, I think, lead in the future. If that's true, then we need more men in the conversation about inclusion. But we've made it really, really hard for a conversation about this because there's no margin for error. And so,
what do you mean there's no margin for error?
There's no margin for error. You get canceled if you misspeak, right? Did you hear about this superintendent of schools out in Western Massachusetts who got his offer rescinded because he called two women on the school committee ladies? I was on a conservative talk show about this. And I don't have an opinion about ladies. It doesn't offend me.
Yeah.
And this is a problem. And so what's happening, I see what's happening is there's less margin for error. There's no room to learn, to mess up and learn and do it better. And yet every day our working world and our realities are getting more complex, more, I would say, textured with layers of difference, seen and unseen. And human beings don't know how to navigate it. And so I don't see a business problem here for people really wanting to do it differently, because they're going to need to in order to create livelihood for themselves.
But some things have changed. Barbie came out this summer. We've done a number of shows. I had a couple of young, I won't call them young ladies because I'll get canceled, young women on the show with very different opinions of Barbie. But it's certainly a movie which has been enormously successful about one kind of female empowerment or another. Is the problem, and we've done shows about the crisis of men in America, is the problem with men, not women these days, Susan? In other words, women have arrived and are thriving, and it's the men who aren't anymore, and that accounts for the crisis in politics and all the rest of it.
Well, I wouldn't accuse women of arriving and thriving. I wouldn't accuse men of thriving either. So I just wrote I just wrote a piece about the Barbie movie. It calls for a sequel about Barbie and Ken working together around gender parity. Look, I don't think a world that is run by women that leaves men the second class, not enough soldiers is any better than a world where men are running the world, right, to the exclusion of women. And so the paradigm itself is going to have to shift, and I think that's going to happen. This latest generation is sort of driving that. So happy to share my.
Did you like the movie? Did you think it was good?
I thought it was fascinating. And did I enjoy myself? You bet. And
did you shout and scream?
Did I what?
Shout and scream in the movie?
Did I shout and scream? No, I laughed pretty hard. I brought one of my daughters.
Yeah.
And
I wish I'd brought my daughter. She would have nudged me and woken me up. But
yeah, good. I think the ending was pretty disappointing, because my life's work has been more about partnering with men. I was raised by a single father. Like, men are my people, and I happen to have some expertise in women's leadership. So it's an interesting moment.
So one of the, I was thinking, in the 18 months since we last talked, one thing that's happened is in terms of female leadership, one of the biggest companies in the world, Google, just promoted its most senior woman, Ruth Porat, who had been CFO. Now she's the president of the company, the formal number 2 in the company. Remarkable woman, very tough woman. A lot of people wondering whether her new job is a coronation or a last dance. Who knows? Maybe she doesn't. But it seems to me as if Ruth Porat is an example of a senior executive who's just Ruth Porat. I'm not sure if she's female or male. She's tough. She cut dramatically at Google. She's making them more and more competitive. As it happens, they actually have a rather weak male CEO. Are you still convinced of these female values when you think of someone like Ruth Porat? I'm not sure how familiar you are with her.
So I try to stay away from, having said, 5 minutes ago about masculine and feminine, I try to stay away from adhering different sort of energies, I suppose, to different genders. Or I just think in a fluid world now, it's, there was just that New York Times piece written by about the, how binary Barbie and Ken is. There's no in between. What I will say is, I think it's a very difficult charter right now for leaders to make the hard decisions necessary to maintain value, and do it in a way where you are a human being with the human beings. And I think that's going to be the call for future of leadership. So it doesn't matter how you identify. It matters that the people around you feel valued and that they can bring their unique strengths to the table. And if they can't, they'll quit you. So if you want to get things done, you're going to have to figure out how to do it with and through human beings, even when you have to reorg, which a lot of companies are doing right now.
Well, I want to take a break. We're thrilled that our new sponsor of the show is Liberties Quarterly, Culture and Politics, which deals with these issues on a quarterly basis. I'm going to run a short ad for Liberties, and then we'll be back with Susan MacKenty Brady to talk more about how to arrive and thrive in 2023. So stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Beyond the news, the noise, there is nuance, insight. Liberties is not just a journal of ideas. It's a meteor of intelligent substance. It's the place to be for engaged citizens. Politics, opinion, substance. Liberties is a triumph for freedom of thought. A quarterly of urgency, of cultural exploration, of intellectual delight, of immaculate prose. It's invaluable. Subscribe now or find Liberties at your favorite bookseller.
We are back with Susan MacKenty Brady, the co-author of Arrive and Thrive. Susan, before the break, you talked about the margins of error were were shrinking when it came to talking. How important is media? We just had an ad for Liberties, which is all about liberal thought. Is one of the problems that everyone's terrified of saying the wrong thing, and therefore media itself is becoming increasingly an echo chamber?
Yeah. I mean, look, we've lost our ability to learn every time. I mean, and I'm not talking about, the perpetrators of really bad behavior, Andrew, need to be called on the mat, right? You can't, misogyny at work needed to be called out, right? There are, now figures who stand for the worst of the worst behavior who needed to be taken care of. Things like that aren't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you saying something that angers some interest group, and then all of a sudden your show gets canceled. This is a problem, and it's mainly a problem because what it removes is our ability to relate to language and to learn how different people might receive different messages in different ways. And guess what? Like, we need to have learning conversations. If you and I are working together, the last thing I want to do is speak to you in a way that irritates you every day to the point where you aren't as productive, or you treat me disrespectfully, or, we don't get the work done that we need to get done, right? I'm talking in the workplace. So we need to kind of come back to a place where we can learn and grow. And men in particular, I think, feel shut down. I mean, 60% of men, there was a poll done, 60% of men are less likely to come towards a women's leadership or advancement effort that will create gender parity because they fear.
Last time I checked, Susan, I'm a man, and I have to admit, I don't feel as if I'm being shut down by anyone or anything. It seems as if there's two things simultaneously going on. There's maybe this cultural correctness or Stalinism, whatever you want to call, which is certainly going on. But at the same time, there's a more and more open media. You talked about my show getting shut down if I said the wrong thing. The reality is no one can shut my show down. It's my show.
Yeah.
I need to sell it, of course, but the only person who can shut my show down is me, even if nobody listens. So on the one hand, we have a world where everyone is an influencer. Everyone can run their own media on platforms, on X, on Facebook, on podcast, on Substack. And on the other hand, we have this increasingly sort of maybe archaic or paralyzed corporate world. Is the answer then for people to get out of the corporation and become entrepreneurs themselves? Or is the answer for large corporations to become more entrepreneurial, more risk-taking?
Well, look, if you can afford to have your show without listeners and without ads, right? You just showed a really interesting,
yeah, I mean, if I started being rude about Liberties, obviously they would pull out, but they like my work because I don't fall into categories, and they don't fall into categories. That's why I like Liberties.
Right. Look, I don't think we're going to see the end of organizational life, at least not in my lifetime. And so we're left having to figure out how to work together more effectively. And I think there's going to be a new suite of skills needed that are very practical, that can be deployed. I mean, a couple of them we did talk about in Arrive and Thrive. And, the 7 practices, as we've been working, around with the practices, with leaders, women, these are not just for women. These practices are for everyone. I don't care how you identify. If you're going to come into a situation thinking that you are better than the person you're talking to, eventually that's going to be damaging to whatever could be productive in that relationship. And if you're going to come into a conversation where you don't think your point of view matters, or you don't feel like you have, sort of the right thing to say, and so you're nervous to speak up, that's suboptimal. That's practice number 1 around sort of returning to your best self and showing up in a way that has. Did I mute myself somewhere through that?
Yeah, continue, Susan. It was the agents of political correctness shutting you up. No, in all seriousness, you're fine. Continue, please.
Yeah, no, what I was saying is, if I approach a situation where I think I'm smarter than other people in the room, it'll eventually backfire. And if I approach a situation where I think I'm not good enough and that my voice doesn't matter or I don't have anything of value to add, then that's going to actually be suboptimal. And so I don't see a world where in the first practice of the book, investing in and returning to your best self, which I think is for all humans, I don't see a world where that can go wrong. Having respect for self and having respect for other and trying to sort out where are you coming from, because I can't possibly understand you and what you might be saying. So I got to ask more questions, have a little intellectual humility. These are things that I think are not that are practicable, right? That are really important, really important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. But again, this seems to be happy talk. In the 18 months since we've talked, Elon Musk has acquired Twitter and reinvented it, renamed it as his own personal fiefdom. Trump, for all his woes in the legal system, from a political sense, seems to be going from strength to strength. The very people that you're writing against, or the very practices that you're writing against, you talk about the 7 good practices, but it seems to be the bad practices and the practitioners of those practices that seem to be winning in 2023.
I don't know about that. So, look, if I go to a hospital system and I find out that a senior leader, when he gets angry, he spits in people's faces and turns red. And if my work helps to wake that person up and ally him to the best part of himself so that he knows that that's actually not probably a great motivational technique because no one's told him because he's been a bully for 30 years. If that is and I offer him a new way to do it and he does, and everybody calms down, we do better medicine. We have better processes. We can follow our protocols better and we can be more efficient. Hopefully we cure more lives. Like, look, there's implications here and I'm seeing it.
Well, you've been a wonderful sport, Susan. That's one of the reasons I like having you on my show. I can be obnoxious and you don't get offended. Let's a little bit, in all fairness to you, you talk about these 7 essential practices. We talked a little bit about empathy, but not everyone will have seen the first interview. So perhaps you might talk a little bit more about the other 6 practices or the other values that you think are essential to make our world a better place and create real leaders, whether they're male or female.
Yeah. Well, I just think people need a recipe. I think people are, after the pandemic, there was a lot of surviving and sort of like trying to make sense out of what do I want? What do I like? Where do I want to be? The practices, I think, of Arrive and Thrive are about a conscious interest in growth so that the gap between our intention and our impact is as narrow as possible, right? So that we can live lives that we want to live. So another example of a practice is around embracing authenticity. And I've seen a lot of bad behavior under the guise of I'm just being myself. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, that, your unique self is your greatest competitive advantage. And so who are you?
Is that again more happy talk? I hate that word authenticity because no one knows what it means. It just
I know.
means whatever you want it to mean.
All right, you ready for this? Because you are, I'm about to compliment you, even though you're a provocateur of the first order. We did a study at Simmons about what does it mean to be authentic? Because like you, I'm kind of annoyed with the word. It doesn't mean anything. And it turns out authenticity is correlated most with honesty and transparency and confidence. And so what does honest mean? It means I'm not going to leave you thinking that I'm having a whole second conversation and not being real with you because you're not going to trust me. You're not going to work with me. When we have to have a debate, you're not going to really talk to me. There's going to be value left on the table, et cetera, et cetera. So coming back and figuring out what do we value, and over time, the thought that our authentic self or our real genuine self changes, I think is a notion a lot of people don't understand. And the research is really clear about this. So like checking in and saying, what do I value now at this stage of the game versus 10 years ago when I had little kids and I was, a crazy working mom, now, so we change over time. Knowing that and how and what we need so we don't leave ourselves behind. Super important, or else we're going to get resentful of all the people around us. Another practice that I really appreciate is inspiring a bold vision. The research is wrong that says that women are not as good as men at having a bold vision. I think women do it differently, and the research shows that we do. This is not happy talk. We are collaborative in a visioning process, more collaborative, which means we don't have to come up with the actual vision. It's not a solo endeavor. It's what's a gap that could improve, and then inviting other people to solve that gap. So there's some practicalities to this, and I completely reject the notion that this is happy talk. I happen to be an enthusiastic, optimistic, positive soul, born that way. And I think there's a way to have a relationship with self and with others that'll create less stress, less loneliness, more happiness, more joy, more connection, all the stuff that we want.
One of the themes, Susan, that comes up a lot in this show is that our moral map seems to be increasingly the most convincing or effective cartographers, if you like, of our moral future are not coming out of politics, are not coming out of Hollywood. They seem to be coming out of corporations and perhaps business schools. Should corporations, can they be our moral compass as we move forward? Will we, in the latter part or the second quarter of the 21st century, will we be looking for corporations for moral guidance?
That's a great question. There's a problem that I don't think has been addressed enough, that I see as an opportunity, that was brought to bear very much during the pandemic. And so in our post-pandemic world, we had to wrestle with slowing down enough to see the human being in others as opposed to the human resource. And that notion, the fact that, my life was here and I had to look at you and you might see my background and see like, oh my gosh, her home office is also a guest room, or whatever you make up about me.
You might even be frozen, Susan.
Am I?
No, I'm teasing you because you are.
Okay, good. Because I can't see myself. I'm like, oh gosh.
But we have a nice photo of you, so don't worry.
Okay, never freezes on a good angle. So my point is, I think the moral compass of our time, the moral calling of our time, is reconciling this human being with the resources we see as we go through our lives. And the companies are not being spared having to deal with that. The fact that human beings want to be valued and seen and appreciated, and we do want to belong. And I don't know if you saw the Surgeon General's report on loneliness. Crazy that this is.
Yeah, and he blamed a lot of it on social media, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and like when loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day or carrying, 30 more pounds on your body in terms of weight, like that's actually really interesting to me. Like, so what's happening with our mental health as a society? And that's coming right into corporate America. And this is where I don't think corporate America is the moral compass of the future. I think it's going to have to reckon with the impact of a lot of this at work in order to maintain value. And so, that's why I choose not to run a nonprofit. I do work at a nonprofit educational institution, but it's why I choose to get to leaders in the halls of working world and not elsewhere in society, because I actually think there's people who are going to put money to figuring out how to help us be well with one another to create lives and value that we want. Call it happy talk, Andrew. I don't care. I believe it.
Well, it's happy talk coming out of Needham, Massachusetts, which is it's going to cheer everyone up on a Thursday in August. Susan, what about the issue of AI? An interesting piece by Ian Bremmer, my old friend. He's been on the show a couple of times. The AI power paradox, suggesting that AI is going to turn corporations into great powers. Is AI an opportunity, or is it a warning? Is it something that worries you, or can it help us all arrive and thrive?
Yes, all of it. Yes. It worries me. It's an opportunity. It's confounding. I have a couple of high-techy people in my life who are, they were early adopters to ChatGPT and the whole 9 yards. And, what's daunting is, I don't know if you've done this because you're pretty good at what you do. I think I'm pretty good at what I do. If you come up with a thing that you think you get paid the most to go consult on, and you just put it into chat and it gives you exactly your remedy, that's concerning.
Well, I can ask ChatGPT what Andrew Keene would say about X. Maybe not X like Twitter, but how I might think about arriving and thriving, and it will tell me what I think, which is interesting.
Yeah. Is it right?
Well, I haven't asked about arriving and thriving.
But you should. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's still relying on us, but can we create, or I'm sure you've given it some thought, can you create AI around your 7 practices? Can you package up what you're arguing in Arrive and Thrive and provide corporations, HR departments, and individuals with ways to make themselves better?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. We have a certificate course, both asynchronous and instructor-led. Look, the human job, that's not the AI job, is actually a little bit of a journey inside. What changes me changes we. And so if my most powerful moment is always the present moment, I got to pay attention to my present moment, not rely on an algorithm or an information system to do that for me. So there's still the human being in the equation, no matter how you slice it.
No, it's good there's still a human being. We need human beings like Susan MacKenty Brady, who's wise enough or brave enough to come on the show and get accused of being a happy talk merchant. And it's wonderful to talk to you, Susan. Finally, the book's a bestseller. Congratulations. You said you're working on a new book. What's it about and when's it out? And you have to come back on the show to talk about it.
I would love to. I have collaborated with the 66th Inspector General of the United States Army, Les Smith, and recently retired, and a disciple of the Harvard Negotiation Project, Stu Kleiman, who is an expert in human capital. And the 3 of us are pairing up, and we are producing a book called In the Line of Fire. And it's about all the stuff that you and I have talked about that we're facing, just going through our day, having normal conversations, trying to get work done. So the book itself is I don't know yet. I think we're talking the first quarter of 25. So we got a year. I'm not going to compete with the election, Andrew. I don't think anyone's going to listen anyway. So let's get through that. And then, I'll be back in a year. Hopefully with my co-op.
I hope it won't be another 2 years to come back on the show. I have to get you back on in 2024, Susan, to talk more, because you offer a very wise and compelling vision of how we can make sense of ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.